Here we go again. This is for English 201, in continuation of our work, Summer 2014. Some of us have mentioned to me that we're having problems differentiating between form or structure on the one hand and content or theme on the other hand. So let's go back to basics. First, of course, we have events or plot, P-L-O-T, the happenings. Now, some works of literature are kind of like soap operas. Something is always happening, but the happenings don't have much meaning attached to them. They may be humorous and make us laugh, that's about it. Yes? Okay, now those kinds of works of literature are called the picaresque novels. Picaresque. Thank you very much. Yes? Thank you. But generally speaking, is a picaresque novel pretty much a novel for entertainment purposes? Yes or no? Yeah. We have a few picaresque novels that in actual fact, thank you very much. Yes. That in actual fact have stayed in our memory because they have a larger meaning attached to them. For instance, Huckleberry Finn, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Why? Because, of course, Twain, as a white American, Southern educated man, wrote a book which afterwards, when people asked him about it, he laughed and said, "Oh, I've written a wicked book." But, of course, Twain was a known satirist and ironist. But what was so meaningful about this book, especially when we revisit it as adults, it's a book we read as teenagers and we thought it was funny. So many things were happening on the borders of the Mississippi River. Yes? But when we revisit it as adults, we're struck by the fact that the person who is the true father figure to the little boy Huck, a boy whom his own society would have considered white trash. Yes? We don't know what happened to his mother. He is looked after by the widow Douglas. His father is a derelict alcoholic who abuses him and finally almost kills him. Yes? And the true father figure and source of true moral training for Huck is guess who? The runaway slave, Jim, the black man who in that time and that society was considered a non-person, a nobody. Yes? So, in other words, then, we understand why it was that Twain would have said, "Oh, I've written a wicked book." He was being sarcastic. He meant, I've written a book that this hypocritical slave society would consider wicked. You understand? In other words, it was a book in which he made the non-person, the slave, the true person of moral value, the true caring father figure to the little boy who so much needed that. Yes? Okay. So, in other words, then, that's an example of a novel that's filled with happenings. It's a picaresque novel. But it has a lot of meaning and moral message interwoven into the events. But generally speaking, events must have an important moral meaning attached to them if we are going to actually pay much attention to them. Otherwise, they'll kind of make us smile for a minute, but they'll basically go in one ear and out the other. Okay. But generally speaking, when we're looking at form or structure on the one hand and content versus theme on the other hand, are we looking at the how for the structure and the what for the meaning or the message? And I asked you earlier, for instance, looking back at Miguel Street, which is the incident that leaves you with a lot of food for thought. It stays in your memory. And you told me Lorna's suicide. Certainly for me, that's the one too. And when I first read it, of course, as a teenager, I didn't realize she had killed herself. I swallowed Hat's story. I swallowed Hat's story along with the little boy. I said, oh my gosh, she got a cramp and drowned. Okay, so in other words, then of course, why does that event become so loaded with meaning for us that we remember it? Precisely because, of course, it conveys the theme of suicide, loss, the impact of suicide on the survivors, reasons for suicide, the real message behind suicide, namely the tragic loss of an innocent human being's life. Yes? In other words, there are religions, the Catholic Church used to, I think the Catholic Church is changing now, thank goodness. No insult to Catholics here, but I grew up in the old version of the Catholic Church, And they used to call suicide the unforgivable sin. And they would refuse to bury in a Catholic cemetery somebody who had committed suicide, died by suicide. They're now changing this, thank goodness. Because, of course, Christ himself on the cross said to the thief, who said, remember me when you are in your paradise. And Christ said, this day thou shalt be with me in paradise. In other words, you are forgiven. Yes? In other words, that thief was in extremis. He was probably talking to Christ with his last drop of energy, his last breath. Isn't that the truth? Yes? And we really don't know, do we, exactly when death comes. So why do we assume that, the person who commits suicide cannot be forgiven? The message of Christ himself is all is forgivable. Isn't that the truth? So then, Lorna's suicide does bring to mind a lot of the thoughts and philosophies and moral teachings about suicide and death. Yes? And does it also bring to us the real tragedy of the loss of an innocent young human life? Yes? And the expression, the person who commits suicide never just kills only himself or herself. He or she kills whoever cared most about him or her. Is that true? Can we see the reason for that? Yes or no? I hate sitting here talking to myself. Yes or no? Yes. Now, in a sense, does Lorna's suicide kill any residue of the carefree, laughing mother figure, Laura? Yes or no? Does it kill another dimension of innocence in the boy? Yes. Of course. So then, if it's an event of that kind that stays with us and challenges us morally quite often, or emotionally, do we consider it part of the level of content or theme? It's not just part of the plot. It's not just part of the sum total of events, the happenings. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Then, of course, you have the question, the structure, the how. How are the meanings conveyed to us? How, for instance, is the meaning of Lorna's suicide conveyed to us? Through irony and through Hat's voice. Now, Hat himself is a recurring father figure who keeps reappearing. Yes? And Hat's sugarcoating style, of course, says a mouthful to us as adult readers or young adult readers. Yes? It's what they just always do. They swim out and out till they can't swim no more. Yes? And does the adult reader in us say, in fact, to Hat, are you kidding? Who are you fooling? Yes? But the adult reader in us also engages with Hat's voice and admires Hat for doing what? Trying to protect the little boy from this grim reality. In other words, maybe there are some things that it's worth lying about. You know what I mean? To protect people we love. Mm-hmm. Okay, so then, if the suicide is itself part of the theme of what? Loss in this novel. And is that a recurring theme that keeps resurfacing? Loss of innocence, yes? Loss of trust, loss of life, loss of freedom. All of these losses keep piling up, don't they? Mm-hmm. And how is it conveyed to us? Through irony? Through tragedy? Yes? And of course, along with irony, will go its second cousin, dualism. On the surface, it seems like, one of these weekend accidents where people swim carelessly and drown. But we know better. Yes? The contradiction, the irony. Okay. And is it also conveyed to us through the familiar structure that is there throughout the novel and hooks us throughout the novel, namely what? Voice. Are we looking at the storytelling voice, the child's voice, and Hat's voice? Hat's reassuring line voice. Yes?
What about the mom's voice? Isn't she the voice of guidance?
Sorry?
The mom's voice?
Which one?
The mother.
Oh, you mean later? But we're talking about the death of Lorna. Does she discuss the death of Lorna? No. Okay. In other words, are we looking at, sorry there, thank you. Are we looking at two major voices, the boy's voice and Hat's voice, which are in a constant, if you want to call it, conversation with us throughout the novel? Hat is always making a comment on something, and the boy is always telling us the stories. Yes? And we, the reader, as adults, are listening. Sometimes we're listening to Hat's voice and saying, really? Are you kidding? Yes? When Hat says to the little boy, when the little boy asks, how Laura does live? And Hat says, oh, she does have, sometimes her husband does come and bring her things. And she does have friends in the market that gives her things. And we, the reader, listen to that reassuring, charming, lying voice, and we say, oh, really? Who are you fooling? Not me. Okay. So in other words, then, these voices speak to us loudly and memorably. But if there is one basic structure or method of storytelling in the collection, what is it? Whose voice is it? Speak to me. The little boy's voice. And that little boy's voice is usually, it's typical of your usual first-person narrative voice. We said the first-person narrative voice was intimate, engaged and engaging, yes, often quite intense, yes, but potentially biased? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So then, what do we think? If that is the first structure in the work, it is also the one that, as we said at the very beginning of this series, it's the one that appeals to us dualistically on two levels. In other words, the voice of the innocence in the child, the innocent child, appeals to the child in us. But at the same time, ironically and dualistically, the adult in us is saying, do you really expect me to believe that? Yes? Or, as we said previously, when the little boy says, Laura must have held a world record. She had 8 children by 7 different men. Wow! Beat that! The adult in us says, really? This cannot end well. The child in us says, oh, she must have been very busy, and laughs. Maybe she held a world record. But the adult in us says, this cannot end well. So, in other words, the voice of the child hooks us on the level of our inner child, but on the level of the adult as well. Would you agree with that? Yes. What other structures do we notice in this work? Are we looking at irony throughout? Irony has to do with contradictions of every kind. Yes? Irony in the events. It's ironic that it is Lorna who actually commits suicide when her mother, Laura, seems to be living a life of self-destruction. Isn't that the truth? Yes. Then, of course, are we looking at another kind of irony? The contradiction between what Mrs. Herrera appears to be and what she is. The contradiction between what Hat appears to be. He appears to be the caring, nurturing father figure, but in actual fact, he's a hustler, a gambler. Yes? And in the end, the disappearing father figure. Yes? Because in the end, when he does reappear, he has changed, and the boy has passed that critical transition into young manhood. Doesn't really need him anymore. What is it the boy tells us quite grimly? When Hat went to jail, a part of me had died. Okay, so if we look at today's handouts from the reading portfolio, are we also able to see the archetypes? And what I said in the course outline, it's the last 2 pages of the last booklet that you just got, the booklet that starts with the feminine principle, yes? And it says, study will proceed thematically across genres. In other words, we'll use the short stories, we'll use the folk stories, we will use Bodden's short stories, which are historically based, yes? And then we're looking at an overview that ties it all together, archetypes, recurring issues, etc. Then, of course, are we going to see it all in terms of the colonial past in slavery, the roles that were created for men and women in slavery? Yes? You see them there, the mammy, the breeder, the enchantress, etc. Yes or no? Can we connect the characters to these roles? Of course we can. And then, of course, some of these roles overlapping?
Yeah.
Exactly. Is Laura dualistically both the mammy, the breeder, the earth mother, the Amazon, and the enchantress, or what we've called the sex goddess? Maybe even the prostitute. But that's a difficult word to define, isn't it? Both Laura and Mrs. Herrera make us wonder exactly what is a prostitute. The Amazon is a strong survivor. The but who is the survivor? The Amazon? It's actually, there was a legend, I don't know if it's true, about these an African tribe of women who were very, very tall, very, very strong, and they call them Amazons. I don't know if it's historically provable, but I read it somewhere. Yes? But the Amazons suggest immense strength. Yes? Physical strength. Yeah? These were not size 2 women, in other words. And Laura doesn't want to be a size 2 woman. And even if Laura had heard about panty girdles and Spanxies and so on, she wouldn't and could afford them. She wasn't going to wear them. Yes? And even if Laura had heard about things like Weight Watchers, she wouldn't, and the gym, she wouldn't have been going. Yes? Okay. Sorry?
What's the vampiric?
The vampiric mother figure. A vampire is a bloodsucker. Yes? The mother figure who sucks the blood of her children.
Laura.
Thank you, Laura. And of course, are we looking at, here we are, isn't that the version of the mother that Nettleford is talking about in our essay when he says he's never allowed to forget that he is his mother's son. And it is her legendary indulgence that gives him all this freedom. It's in the collection called The Feminine Principle, the second booklet that was brought to you by Roberto. Yes? Do we all have it in front of us? Yes? It says course outline. These are our main archetypes. So the blood-sucking mother figure. Yes? Remember last time we spoke about that when we were talking about Nettleford's essay? Sorry?
No.
Not.
I can't remember some of it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to have to go back and read that essay again because it's important. Okay? And then, of course, what are we looking at? The disappearing father figure, yes, who helps the disappearing father figure is related to the stud. We said last time that the black man or the man in slavery, the slave man, was used for his sperm, his fertility, and his muscle power. He was what Nettleford calls the penis personified. He was seen as not really a human being with a brain, or least of all a soul. Yes? Okay. And the disappearing father figure then relates to who? To what? The stud and the fragmented black male-female relationship and the female-centered or female-headed black family. Do we see that as number B there? Yes or no? Are they all interconnected? Obviously, because they all emanate from the slavery, the structure of slavery. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Then memory as a link to a painful, traumatizing past. In other words, do many of our older relatives, great-grandparents, etc., tell us stories of how life used to be, where we can actually see how slavery had an inequality, had molded the structure of the society. Yes or no? Of course. Of course. Is this true especially in countries where there was a long tradition of plantation slavery, like Jamaica, for instance?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Of course. Now, there's a booklet I just brought you. We've been doing lots of photocopying. We've been abusing the photocopier, yes, for our beautiful students. Yes. This one, it says the past stroke memory as the voice of the past. You may have found this on your desk. It looks like this one. The past, in the right-hand corner, it says the past stroke memory as the voice of the past. Here are some more. Yes, that little booklet. Does it deal with a lot on the past? Have I put them together as part of the theme called The Power of the Past? Have we all gotten it? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Now, if we're looking at memory as the link to a painful, traumatizing past, does the past itself then seem to have its own voice, especially when we listen to members of the older generation talking? Yes? Say, for instance, a man like my father, who died at maybe 88, 89, when he talked about when he was a boy in Jamaica, were you aware, or were we aware of how different things were then? Only the privileged got to go to school, to high school. Yes? He was one of the most intelligent, articulate, eloquent men I've ever met, inside or outside of university. Yes? And yet this was somebody who never even got to finish high school because he left high school to help his mother look after younger brothers and sisters. Those younger brothers and sisters had children. This was not the age of contraception. The children of his younger brothers and sisters, he helped to bring them up too. Many of them, one of my older female cousins was the first woman judge in Jamaica, for instance. Her brother was an international economist. In other words, did that generation of people migrate to England, usually as part of the army, when Churchill begged people from the colonies to come and join the army to fight against Hitler? And did they get the opportunity to go to university? An opportunity they wouldn't have had in Jamaica. In other words, have Caribbean people long understood the value of education as a form of escape from inequality? Yes or no? Yeah. Is that why, for instance, people like your teacher your lecturer, gets absolutely livid with these teenagers who are being paid by the government, your government, to come to college? The books are paid for, the school fees are paid for, they are even given pocket money to come, and they will not come to class. And I'm trying to explain to them, do you wish to turn back the clock of history? You understand what I'm saying? So you understand why some of your lecturers get very, very angry about the absenteeism and so on. Is it because we know the history behind lost opportunities? Yes, of course. And say, for instance, listening to my father, especially when he was ill and talking more about the past, did we learn about the inequalities of the past? Yes. And the loss of talent, the loss of creativity, because of inequality in the society that had just been part of the tradition coming from slavery in a society like Jamaica. Okay, so when we're looking at the power of the past and number C, memory as the link to a painful, traumatizing past, are we also thinking in terms of the writers who understood the impact of slavery and inequality on human development and, of course, human underdevelopment? Do we realize this very clearly? And is it very painful? Of course, it has to be. Do we all know people, talented, gifted people, who lost opportunities just because of the time they were born? Yes or no?
Yes.
Do you know many Caymanian, older Caymanian people who were gifted shipmakers, gifted sailors? Yes?
Yes.
Who, if they were living, it had been young in today's era, could have gotten scholarships to do engineering and aeronautical engineering and, of course, becoming professional seamen. But did those people learn on their own from each other and from experience? So you get the point we're making, that the more we understand history and where we are coming from, so to speak, is the more we should commit ourselves to what? Not repeating that painful history. Is part of the tragedy of Laura's story, the fact that she keeps repeating this history of having children without visible means of support, without caring fathers, just having children. Yes? And then she turns around and is upset with her daughter when the daughter is impregnated. As a teenager, this is some form of sexual abuse, you know. Are you aware of this?
Yeah.
Isn't it the school teacher? Yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying is, you know, if we refuse to understand, you've heard it, Marcus Garvey says it, Bob Marley says it, a million people say it. We must know our history in order to what? Not repeat its crimes and sufferings. Yes? Okay, so does the Caribbean writer, and did I say that to you in the beginning, that in a sense, part of the commitment of the Caribbean writer is to what? Retell our history and to find a new voice in which to tell that history. Not the voice of the winners, not the voice of Columbus and his followers, but the voice of our ancestors. Yes? To create for us our own voice, to tell our own story in terms of our own unique experience. Is that part of the mission of the Caribbean writer? Of course it is. And do we get that voice in various forms and structures? We get it through the storytelling voice of the little boy who is traveling to manhood. We get it through the lying but protective voice of Hat, the experienced Caribbean man who understands the need to protect this child, but who in the end falls into his own trap and is not there when the child most needs him. Old habits die hard. He's a hustler. Yes? He can't stop hustling somehow. Okay, do we have a poem then in our collection that directly speaks to us about memory, the voice of the past, and sees that memory and hears that voice in the land itself? It's on the front of that collection, little booklet called The Past or Memory as the Voice of the Past, Carter and Walcott. See the poet as the voice of this memory. Now tell me, what is a bridge? A bridge is something that joins two separate areas. Exactly. That night, when I left you on the bridge, I bent down, kneeling on my knee, and pressed my ear to listen to the land. I bent down, listening to the land. But all I heard was tongueless whispering. Tongueless whispering, 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 whispering. On my right hand was the sea behind the wall, the sea that has no business in the forest. And I bent down, listening to the land. And all I heard was tongueless whispering, whispering. Tongueless whispering, as if some buried slave wanted to speak again. Now, we spoke of this previously, didn't we? And we made the point that Naipaul, in an important historical work called The Middle Passage, spoke of the fact that cutting out the tongues of rebellious slaves was a practice, a punishment, a legal practice. Anything was legal that could be done to slaves, yes? Because slaves were non-persons. They weren't real people. Cut out the tongue of the rebellious slave was a practice in the Dutch Caribbean. But generally speaking, were slaves non-persons who had no voice. Yes? And no right to express themselves. Okay, so we're looking at memory then as a key to the past. And we're looking at the idea that, of course, the people who have no voice are the people who are seen as non-persons and treated as non-persons in their societies. Is one of the reactions, of course, of the non-person, the person who knows he is unequal and that there are no open opportunities for equality in his society. The best thing he can do is get on a boat or a plane and maybe go to a more democratic, a less hostile society, a less unequal society. Yes or no? Yes. We've seen what? Migration as a way of escaping inequality. But if you look in that same booklet, the one we were just reading, The Voice of the Past, on the second to last page, a poem by the Jamaican poet Mervyn Morris. I am the man. First, we've heard about the tongueless whispering of a dead slave from Martin Carter from Guyana. Now, hear about the voice that comes from the man who understands that in his society, he's a nobody, he's nothing. It's called I Am the Man. You read this one in high school?
No.
Mm-hmm. Are we ready for this one? Yes? And if we're thinking in terms of our reading of structure and voice, is this a memorable first-person voice as well? A very angry voice too. I am the man that built his house on shit. I am the man that watched you bulldoze it. In other words, the government has sold all this government land where all these poor people used to live, has sold it to some rich developer who is going to build some upscale shopping centers and apartments and townhouses. You people have to find somewhere else to live. Yes? I am the man that watched you bulldoze it. I am the man of no fixed address, which is how the police describe a lot of the people they are looking for. No fixed address. They don't have a home. Follow me now. I am the man that have no job. I am the man that have no vote. I am the man that have no voice. Hear me now. I am the man that have no name. I am the man that have no home. I am the man that have no hope. Nothing is mine. But I am the man that filed the knife. I am the man that make the bomb. I am the man that grab the gun. Study me now. Study means what? Pay attention to me now. Because I'm going to make you pay attention to me now. Through what? Violence. You wouldn't listen to me when I cried out to you for help. Yes? You bulldozed my little houses and shacks and said, oh, we need some shopping centers here. Upscale, elegant, for rich people. Yes? When I said I have no hope, nothing is mine, who heard me? Now you are going to study me now. You're going to pay attention to me now.
The shopping is made for the profit.
Yeah. So are we looking at the impacts of inequality? Is that why, my friends, a lot of your teachers get so angry with these people who come to class when the classes are almost over, who keep missing classes for no good reason? I had a few who, having missed 3 classes, arrived actually apparently high the other night. I am kidding you not. And their behavior was so disruptive. In a group of people, many of whom are coming from work, hungry, thirsty, back hurting, paying for themselves. Older people who have understood the value of the opportunity offered by the college. Yes? These people, the absentees and the malingerers and so on, are being paid for by this government, your government, and the government before it. Even the books are paid for. I think they're even given lunch money. And can I get them to settle down and pay attention? It's as if they have no sense of what? History. Okay. All right. So come back then. Do you understand then why a lot of your Caribbean teachers get so upset at the absenteeism and the lack of commitment? Is it that I'm just a little nag? One lady stood up in the class. She's a former future Caymanian teacher, Caymanian lady, and told me that I was nagging these boys. I was picking on them. Sorry? I don't know what she was looking for. I told her, if she disapproved of my telling them to sit up straight and pay attention and stop flirting, trying to flirt with the girls next to them, and so on and so on and so on. Yes? And that if you would get up to leave the room, you say, excuse me. If you come in late, you say, good evening, or excuse me. Such things. Yes? Manners and courtesy. Yeah. If I am nagging, then of course she knows what to do. The older people in the class told me point blank, put them out. Some of the younger people too. One guy said to me, please just put them out. Stop wasting time with them. Nonetheless, are we looking at one of our archetypes, namely education and migration, as what? Forms of escape. Okay. All right. To continue. Looking at our archetypes then, can we see major themes and major characters popping up? There is also what? The fragmentation of identity and the resulting quest for identity, personhood, and roots. In other words, if you're coming from a society in which you are told you are nobody, yes? Then of course, is your identity and your sense of self-worth going to become fragmented? Yes, of course. Then, of course, is there number E, individualism versus community. What's individualism? The faith in me and myself and me and myself, and the desire to actually achieve for me only. It's the beginning of that same booklet that has the feminine principle on the front. Yes? It's in the middle there. The course outline content. Yes or no? Are we together? Yes. Okay. When we look at individualism, can it be positive as well as negative? The individualism reaction is, I grab the knife, I take the gun. Yes? The community aspect is, I'm going to find a way to acquire some form of training so that I can earn an honest living and help support those who are dependent on me. Yes? Is individualism versus community, say in the Cayman context. Individualism says, the government is paying for this, it doesn't matter. I don't have to go to classes. Yes? It doesn't matter. Right? These teachers are just a bunch of nags. Right? They're nagging me. The book, the government paid for it. It doesn't matter if I leave it in the classroom, under a desk somewhere, even though it costs $150. But I didn't pay that $150. Government is paying for it. Yes? Is that the individualism approach? And when I lose my scholarship, I cost the government. And I cost the college and the president. You understand? What does the community reaction say? I'm going to continue my education because I want to be in a position where I have a training and profession and professionalism to offer. Yes? And then when I go for a job, I have real bargaining power. Or I'm in a position where I have the skills and the training that I can actually what? Set up a small business of my own. Maybe carpentry. Yes? Maybe some electrical, cooking, hairdressing. In other words, I'm not dependent on the government or on social services. Sewing, no matter how bad the times are, women will spend money on their hair, not to mention the fingernails. Yes? In other words, I can be part of the solution in my community, not the problem. You understand the difference between the individualism versus the community approach. Number F, poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment of every kind, themselves byproducts of slavery and the plantation. In other words, if slavery and the plantation meant that the few would benefit from the sweat and the exploitation of the many, the few would own the valuable land. If that tradition was handed down over years and years, are you going to find a lot of inequality being handed down in various ways? And if these inequalities are reinforced by stereotypes about people, yes, that say the color of their skin defines who they are, yes, then of course, are you going to have, it's like generation after generation of underdevelopment. Does this make sense? Yes or no? I'm talking to you. Yes. Okay. Now, is that why that line from Bob Marley's song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds, is so often quoted? Does Roy Bodden have a quotation that comes to mind also? He says, he makes a criticism. He's talking about divisive relationships or lack of relationships between Caymanians and non-Caymanians. He says that what? instead of lighting a candle, they typically curse the darkness. It's in the Bodden extract essay that I gave to you some time back. Yeah, I told you I had extracted it from his preface to the Caymanian Islands in Transition, which those of you who are doing history may be reading and which you should buy. Okay. Now the interesting thing is, Bodden, of course, is speaking about problems in Cayman society, but does his point about lighting a candle versus cursing the darkness apply to all societies, and especially Caribbean societies. In other words, I gave the example before that the individualism response says, curse the government, curse the college, curse the high school, curse the teachers, and of course curse the government. Again, yes? The community response says, hang in here with some form of training. Yes? Believe in yourself and the future. It's possible to earn an honest living. You may not like math, you may not like algebra. I don't blame you for not liking algebra. It meant zero to me. Yes? You may not like English, but you may be great with your hands. The hairdresser who does my hair earns more per hour than I do. Trust me. In other words, the community response is the response that says, we're going to build something positive for the future. What Bodden means when he says, lighting a candle instead of cursing the darkness. Okay? Then, of course, are we looking at sex as a metaphor? In other words, sex, as we know, can be one of the most meaningful and beautiful things in our life experience. Can it also be one of the cheapest and most meaningless things? Yes or no? We don't have to have experienced it ourselves, but I'm sure we have friends who can tell us. Yes or no? Just hate sitting here talking to myself. It's so annoying. Question then. Can sex be a metaphor for lots of things? Can sex be a metaphor for love? Can sex be a metaphor for leverage, for power, for manipulation? Mrs. Herrera? Yes? Can sex be a metaphor for irresponsibility? Laura? Hat? Can sex be a metaphor for irresponsibility and what? Ego tripping? Laura and Hat? And so on down the line. Then, of course, we look at the nexus of race, class, and gender. A nexus is a knot, a knot that's so tightly tied that you can't unpull it easily. Yes? Race as class, or the race-class factor, where some people, because of their race, are automatically identified with a privileged class, whether or not they've earned that privilege. Caste as class. Caste is what? Your ethnicity, your racial origin. Then the inter and the intra-race prejudice. We talked about the intra-race prejudice, didn't we? Where the so-called beautiful man on the island says, who needs this Bigfoot picky head gal? Yes? I wonder what size shoe he wore. Yes. Then the mulatto as a person, as a symbol, as a metaphor. The person of mixed race origin. Yes? Does that represent something else in the Caribbean context? Well, as Mr. Bodden was saying, the truth is in the Caribbean and in countries like ours, where interracial marriages and interracial sex happen for so long. There is actually nobody who is of a pure racial origin, pure and undiluted. And as my first boss here, Mr. Basdio, used to say, given that history also, people in the Caribbean are the ones who should be the very last to have prejudices against other people based on race or ethnicity. Because we are coming from such a racially mixed inheritance. We should be the last people under the sun to have prejudices against other people based on race. What do you think of that, my friend? It's true. Absolutely. We are not checking our phones. No. Okay. Psychocultural schizophrenia. In other words, where people identify with all different cultures, but they have no sense of their own culture. Schizophrenia is what? A double set mindset all the time. Okay. Then we have some other elements there. And do I have another typed version of the archetypes that I did for you as well? Yes, I do. Okay. But actually, it's actually just a neater version. Okay, so we don't need to have that. Okay, I need 6 of those. Okay, can we continue then to finish up with the Nettleford essay and see if we get any more of those? There. Any more of our archetypes? We have the Nettleford essay in front of us? Yes or no? We stopped, didn't we, when we talked about the concessions and refutations concerning Professor Errol Miller's argument that the Caribbean young men are being feminized because they're surrounded by all of these powerful female figures, yes? Mamas, grandmas, older sisters, all of these people who seem to have lots of power in his life and who have lots of control. But my question is, was this power or control given to them on a silver platter? Or do the mamas and the grandmas and the older sisters, etc., pay for the positions of respect and power that they have in the home? Do they pay by what? Hard work, dedication, commitment, yes or no? Living up to responsibility. Or can we put it this way? When the men drop out, do the women have to step in?
Yeah.
Yes. And then that brings us to the next poem that we're going to read. It's attached to the last booklet that we got here from Mr. Roberto. It's attached to Memory as a Key to the Past. It's called For My Mother, May I Inherit Half Her Strength. There are 3 pages of it. Is it in that one? For my mother, may I inherit. No, it's not in that one. It's in the one that says course outline, etc. We're still reading that one now. Yes. Where we have the archetypes, it starts by saying course outline. We were just reading it. Yes? It says, for my mother, may I inherit half her strength. In other words, this is a woman who is too strong for her own good. You don't want that much strength because it makes her too vulnerable. She's so strong that in actual fact, she's very easily taken for granted. And could she even take herself for granted? Maybe not realizing that she needs to stop giving so much that the more sacrifices she makes, the more people expect from her and take her for granted. Have we met mothers and grandmas like that? Yes or no? Of course we have. Excuse me. Can I just check something here? Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Uh-huh. So then, we're going to read that one. For my mother, may I inherit half her strength for next time. Can we finish up with the Nettleford essay in the meantime, however? Okay. He makes a point in paragraph 4 that there is this unequal distribution of labor and responsibility among the boys and the girls in the traditional family in the Caribbean. Yes? And the boys are given what I call a dangerous freedom. Yes? To roam, to polish to hone their skills, to be of as much service as possible to as many heifers as possible. Namely, to sleep around as much as is physically possible. While the girls are locked up at home and they're told, look after the children, look after the housework, do your homework, so on and so on, yes? And the irony is, as we said last time, though there's immense sexism and inequality in the roles that are assigned to the girls versus the boys, yes? What does happen? The girls, in the meantime, are gaining a sense of what Nettleford calls prowess and purpose. Do they learn multitasking and time management? Yes or no? Yeah. And let me ask you a question. Is there a certain amount of self-respect that we gain when we know that we can do certain things well?
Yes.
Yes. And is this what Nettleford is saying is being lost by the Caribbean young men?
Mm-hmm.
In Cayman, it used to be that the young men looked after the boats. Yes? They went out fishing. They learned how to do what? Build boats, build fish nets, etc., etc. Were those skills important skills as survival skills,
Yes.
money earning skills?
Yes.
But were they also skills that helped to build self-esteem?
Yes.
But in today's so-called modernized society, are the young men given too much freedom, but at the same time not gaining alternative skills? No, don't blame your government. Huh? In Cayman, have both of your governments put immense money into education?
They put some,
Astounding amounts of money. Yes.
but they all needed to put like they practice, where you do the hands-on work. Enforcing? Yeah, they needed to do.
Enforcing is a good word. I like that word, enforcing. Yes.
Yeah.
And technical education.
Yeah, they needed like a training.
Mm-hmm.
That will train them to do carpentry and.
Shall I tell you that when I first came here years ago, there was a strong carpentry, architecture, welding, metalwork, electrical department? Oh, yes. Were there more staff in it now than you have now? Yes. What happened? Was there were scholarships given, not just for books, for school, but were $500 a month given to all students, Caymanian students who would come to the college? Even if they hadn't gotten the O levels, it didn't matter. They had an open entry thing.
Okay.
What happened?
Right.
People dropped out. People came in to do electronics, for instance, or carpentry, and then they decided this was beneath their dignity. They wanted a job in a bank. So they switched majors, yeah, got the job in the bank after doing some courses in another department. Then after being in the bank and, can you close the door for us, please, there? And staying for a while and buying an expensive car, they left the bank. Or they went to work in a bank that offered them a few $100s more per month. In other words, are we looking at stereotypes about what we do to earn a living? The concept that if you earn a living with your hands, this is inadequate, it's beneath your dignity. Did we lose a lot of students like that? People like Mr. Ray Jones can tell you. Did we have other teachers working here teaching in that department? Yes. Did they leave because we had more and more students dropping out? Do you understand why it is that teachers at this college, especially teachers of a certain generation, and often the Caribbean teachers, get so upset about the absenteeism and the dropping out? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Does Nettleford continue in paragraph 5? He says, small wonder that girls now outnumber and out-achieve boys at all levels of education. At the University of the West Indies, for example, female undergraduates outnumber the males 2 to 1, and women tend to cop the highest grades. Are we seeing it here at the college? More females than males in every classroom. Yes. I don't know if the girls always get the higher grades than the guys. When we go to convocation, aren't the lines just as long for the guys and the girls? Pretty much. For people who are getting the top grades. Yes or no? Mm-hmm. The paradox is that black males still dominate the Caribbean centers of power and influence: politics, academics, the church, and the corporate business structure. That is true. If you're looking for a head of department, get a man. If you're looking for somebody to run this bank, get a man. Yes? If you're looking for somebody to run this church and be the pastor, get a man. Yes. Okay. Is the Catholic Church an example of that? Yes, of course. And who are the people who support men in power and undermine women in power? Women. That's just by the way. Most women will tell you they don't want to vote for a woman. Why? They don't trust women. In fact, only one woman prime minister, he spoke about it the other day, Dame Eugenia Charles of Dominica, has emerged since independence. Well, in Jamaica now we have Miss Portia Simpson. Okay. Sorry?
I think she might be God. What's her name? Kilpatrick?
Helen, but she's not a prime minister. She's a governor, and she's actually appointed by the Queen. And she's really part of the British power structure, isn't she? In other words, she's not somebody coming from Cayman itself. Throughout the Caribbean, men are still seen as the primary authority figures, even by all women. Yes, what I just said. Is he often ironic? But is he also realistic? Yes. But will they continue to be so? The fear among many black men is that the women will not continue to support them. Yes? And yet old Miss die hard. Yes. Many Caribbean women continue to be protective of the bulls let loose. They claim that slavery and colonialism have done enough harm and that their male offspring must not be further emasculated.
That's right.
As if slavery did not hurt women too.
But it's always been, the way I see it, if you were in a triangle and they were doing ranks, it would be separated into
Yeah.
First of all, it'd be black and white, and then men would still be above women, regardless. So
Of their race.
yeah,
So what you're saying is that gender is more important. Gender differences are more important than race differences.
no, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
it's still more prevalent now than racism.
Yes, well, that's what you're saying. That gender trumps race. That gender comes before race. Yes. And I do agree with you. Or you say it's just as important. Will Mrs. Hillary Clinton be the acid test? Yes or no? Yeah. When it was Hillary, white woman, running against Obama, black man, for the representing the right to represent the Democratic Party, a deal was made and Hillary stepped back. Yes? A very smart woman. And was she rewarded by being made Secretary of State? I think, wasn't she the first woman Secretary of State? And certainly one of the most respected women ever in American politics. Was Condoleezza Rice Secretary of State? Maybe. Maybe.
The one after Colin Powell.
Yes, that's true. But was Hillary respected in a different way from how Condoleezza Rice was? Yes. So it's an interesting discussion. In many senses, are the gender issues just the flip side of the race issues? Or put it this way, is racism just the flip side of sexism? Is prejudice based on race just a flip side, a second cousin to prejudice based on gender? Yes or no?
Yeah.
But can gender be used as an advantage or a disadvantage in a way that race often no longer can be? If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Let me ask the question this way. Oprah Winfrey is loved and adored and listened to. People actually listen to what Oprah has to say. If Oprah says, my gosh, this is a wonderful book, the Book of the Month Club, you have to read it. Everybody will buy it. The publishing houses will do another edition. Because Oprah said so. Has it ever crossed your mind that Oprah would not have been as powerful and influential had she been a man?
Yeah.
Had Oprah been a white man, would she have been as powerful or influential as she is now, an African American and female? No. I do not think so. And this other question, if Oprah had been a size 2, tiny, petite, Afro-American woman, would she have been as influential as she is at maybe size 13 or 14? No. I don't think so. Does Oprah's very well-rounded look suggest to us which of our archetypes? Huh? Not Laura.
Herrera.
The mommy. No, Mrs. Herrera is size 2 or size 4. No. The mommy, the earth mother. Yes? The what? She's relatable. Oprah looks like she's an elegant version of the mommy and the nanny and the earth mother. Isn't that the truth? There is something reassuring and motherly about her very roundness. Yes? When Oprah lost all this weight and went on this killer diet, a lot of her fans objected. And she said, what? My identity is not in my thighs. My legs. I'm still me. Okay. But are we looking at this interesting irony? Okay. Let's continue. But is Oprah definitely the Earth Mother archetype? And the mammy. She doesn't have children of her own, but all her fans are children. Yes. She buys them cars, she gives them gifts, she tells them what to read. Isn't that the truth? Yes. She makes them laugh. This is the Earth Mother, the mammy, in her designer numbers. Yes. And if Oprah wears it, we're going to wear it too. Yes. Thank you. And if Oprah says read it, we're going to read it too. Thank you. We'll find the money and buy it. Okay. Now, interestingly then, many Caribbean women are protective of their bulls let loose. They claim that slavery and colonialism have done enough harm and that their male offspring must not be further emasculated. A man must be allowed to be a man, they argue. And here, as elsewhere, the definition of manhood turns on sexuality. What is a man? It doesn't depend on virtues like dependability, honesty, caring, nurturing, responsibility. Yes? Sexuality. Frantz Fanon, actually the French African black male writer, psychiatrist really, who authored the landmark study The Wretched of the Earth, publicly deplored the image of the black man as a penis personified. But the black West Indian man, too, frequently celebrates this particular view of himself. On the other hand, he is not altogether insensitive to the trouble that may be caused by the reckless use of that blunt instrument. Which blunt instrument? I hope you understand. Yes, the penis personified. He understands the significance of the ills that have befallen Mike Tyson, Michael Jackson, O.J. Simpson, and what's the name of the tall guy? Basketball player. Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant. Did Shaq get in trouble because of sex too? No. Kobe Bryant and, of course, our beloved Magic Johnson, in a world that has yet to come to terms with the threat it feels from black males. But Magic somehow survived because of his honesty. The sexual arrogance of the Caribbean black man is further kept in check by the studied irreverence of the Caribbean black woman, who is quick to inform him that skill takes precedence over bulk. This put-down is a female weapon of self-assertion and self-protection against male power and hubris. Hubris is extreme pride. It's a Latin word for extreme pride, or the Greek word. Hubris, I think it's Latin. But this does not always discourage the Caribbean black man from indulging his fantasies and believing that his penis is the symbol of his power and his manhood. His phallus, his penis. Is Nettleford exaggerating here, or does he have a point? Have we met men who have these attitudes?
Yep.
Yes, of course. Of course we have. And I hate to ask you ladies, but are there women who reinforce those attitudes?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That the women complain about certain male behaviors, but then they turn around and support them. Reinforce it. Young black Caribbean males also see symbols of powerful manhood in African American sports superstars such as Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing. Entertainer and activist Harry Belafonte also has a clear following in the land of his parents' birth, and so on, in the Caribbean, Jamaica. And there are many of Caribbean origin who are heroes in America. Black West Indian males are proud too of General Colin Powell, also of Jamaican ancestry. But military prowess, despite the glamour of the gun, does not seem to give as much status or recognition as superstardom in sports or entertainment. That is true. Of course, but the entertainment industry aspect, he doesn't go into it enough, does he? Because does the music industry adore these stereotypes of men? If they're not quite the penis personified, they're the drug dealer, hip-hop star. You know what I mean? Yes. Isn't that the truth? Surrounded by women who basically are dressed like prostitutes. And these women just seem to adore these men who are covered with gold jewelry and so on. You know? Is it a kind of false version of the hero? Yes or no? That the music industry puts forward. And often, is it an image of the hero as a drug dealer? Yes or no? I'm talking to only one person here. Of course, for the Caribbean black male, there are thousands of ways to lose one's manhood. This year, the West Indian cricket team, after 2 decades as world champions, suffered humiliating losses to Australia and Kenya, drawing an editorial in the Trinidadian Express newspaper, headlined, "Surrendering Our Manhood." Are they crazy? The fact is, the Caribbean black male is terrified of surrendering his manhood, and yet he genuinely wishes to be responsible as a provider and even as a perfect model, a paragon of marital fidelity. He has no desire to abuse his spouse. No doubt he realizes there are strong black women who can return that medicine if he dares to abuse his mate. Rather, he wishes to be caring and compassionate, to be able to cry without being called soft, and to share in the housekeeping and child-rearing without being seen as soft. I think Nettleford is speaking only of some Caribbean men, not all. But fascinatingly enough, what I saw of men in Cuba and their roles in the family, I found very true to what he's saying. They cooked, they looked after children, they took the children for walks, they cleaned the house, they did all kinds of things, and they were the providers and the center of the family. Above all, the Caribbean man wants control over his life, to be less at risk than he feels himself to be in a time of changing gender relationships in a rapidly changing world. Happily, such attitudes suggest that Caribbean black men are ready to find their way to love and liberation. The bulls praised in modern society may be endangered and in need of redefinition, but the Caribbean black male will never be extinct. I think it's a rather optimistic ending to an essay in which Nettleford has actually gone through some very realistic but not at all optimistic aspects of the Caribbean man's behavior. So I do wonder if perhaps the writer, with all due respect to him, had come to a point where he decided, oh dear, I need to come up with a hopeful ending here. And I need to end this thing now. But given the things he has said about the Caribbean male's behavior, I found the ending strangely optimistic. I don't know what you think. Okay. And here are the good copies of the better typed copies of our archetypes. Yes? And a better copy of the young bulls on the loose. Here we are, my friends. Please take them now. These are neater copies. Remember I said to you I was going to retype? Here we are. These are the better copies. Now tell me, are we going to get to list, say, 5 or 6 Caribbean archetypes that we have met on this course? Could it happen? Yes, of course. Could we be asked to connect the archetypes to characters we have met in stories? Yes or no? Could this happen? Yes, it could. Are archetypes also related to major themes? Yes or no? Major subject matter, the what? Yes? Okay. Thank you. Any questions? No. For next time, we're going to be reading the stories. And the stories you must read is For My Mother, May I Inherit Half Her Strength? And I think in that same booklet you will have one called My Father Inside. Yes? If you check through quickly, you should find one called My Father Inside. I think it's in the booklet called Love After Love. Yes or no? You have a booklet called Love After Love? Yes or no, my friends? Yes? Okay, well, in that booklet you're going to find one called Love After Love, and then My Father Inside. Yes? Okay. Make sure that we've read those.
What about the exam?
The exam. What date are we looking at? Is next Friday a holiday by any chance?
No.
No. What are your exams like next week? I'll be bringing you back the quiz when we meet on Tuesday. I will be coming late on Tuesday because there is a meeting with the president that starts at 2. And unfortunately, I have to go to it. So I won't reach here till shortly after 3. Please excuse me. You can come and talk to each other if you want, but please come. I will be coming Tuesday. Where do you prefer your exam? When do you prefer it to be? So Friday then would be the better day, because then I can bring you back the quiz and we can discuss structure again, because I think we're still insecure about structure. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those are the poems we must read. But I think you'll find that once you start reading some of the portfolio poems, you'll want to keep reading. Okay? Any problems? Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have our essays? And we need to shut this up. Okay. Do we just press done then?